There is a watch company that has never, not once, tried to be the biggest, while other brands chased growth, chased volume, chased being seen on every wrist in every airport duty-free. This one did the opposite. It got smaller on purpose, slower on purpose, harder to get on purpose, and that decision is exactly why a single watch from this company sold for over $31 million at auction, the most expensive watch ever sold. The company is Patek Philippe, and the secret behind its prestige isn't the gold, it isn't the diamonds. It's something far stranger and far harder to copy. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll never look at a luxury watch the same way again. Let's start with a phrase you probably heard even if you've never owned a watch in your life. You never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely look after it for the next generation. That's not just a slogan. It's the entire business philosophy compressed into one sentence. Most companies sell you a product and hope you come back in 2 years for the next one. Patek Philippe sells you something they expect to outlive you. Something built to be handed to your child and then to their child, still ticking, still accurate, a century from now. Think about how insane that promise actually is. In a world of planned obsolescence, where your phone is designed to slow down right when the new model launches, here's a company promising the opposite. Built once, repaired forever, passed down forever. That single idea is worth more than any diamond bezel. The seal they built themselves. Now here's where it gets interesting. Patek Philippe doesn't just make watches. It runs something almost nobody outside the industry knows about, called the Patek Philippe seal. Most fine watches are judged by something called the Geneva seal, a quality mark that checks the mechanical finishing of a movement. Patek Philippe used to use that seal too. Then, in 2009, they walked away from it entirely and created their own stricter standard. Why abandon a respected industry seal to build your own from scratch? Because the old standard only judged how a watch was finished. Patek Philippe's own seal judges something much harder to fake, how the entire watch performs over time as a complete functioning object. Precision, reliability, even how it holds up after being serviced. In other words, they weren't satisfied being graded on a curve everyone else was also being graded on. They built a stricter exam and made themselves the only company allowed to take it. That's not marketing. That's obsession. The family that never sold. There's a fact that stops most people in their tracks. Patek Philippe has been run by the same family, the Stern family, since 1932. Not since last decade. Since before World War II. Think about every industry you know. Almost none of them still have founding families making the big decisions this many generations later. Fashion houses get bought out. Car companies merge. Even other watchmakers have been absorbed into massive conglomerates that make dozens of unrelated brands under one roof. Patek Philippe stayed independent, privately owned, family-run, through decades where selling out would have been the easy, obvious, profitable choice. That stubbornness is precisely why the brand still feels different. There's no shareholder demanding they release a cheaper model to hit a quarterly earnings target. There's no boardroom in another country deciding how many watches should ship this year. The decisions are still made by people whose last name has been on the building for generations. 9 years for one watch. Now let's talk about time itself, because this is where the story gets almost unbelievable. Some Patek Philippe watches, the grand complications, can take not weeks, not months, but literal years to build. A single watch can pass through the hands of dozens of specialized craftspeople, each one responsible for a piece so small and so precise that most people would need a microscope just to see it clearly. One especially legendary piece, the caliber 89, took 9 years to design and build, and packed in dozens of separate functions into one mechanical object with no batteries, no chips, no software. Just springs, gears, and staggering human patience. Ask yourself, what other product in the modern world takes 9 years to make, on purpose, by choice, when faster methods clearly exist? None. That's the point. Here's the part that really explains why the prestige is so hard to copy. Owning a Patek Philippe isn't really about telling the world you're wealthy. Plenty of watches do that, louder, flashier, more obviously expensive looking. Patek Philippe plays a different game entirely. It's often described as the watch other watch collectors notice, not the one strangers on the street recognize. It's a quiet signal, understood mainly by people who already know exactly what they're looking at. That's an incredibly hard thing to manufacture. You can't fake decades of restraint. You can't fake 100 years of a family refusing to cut corners, even when nobody outside the industry would have noticed if they had. The $31 million proof. And that brings us to the auctions, because this is where the whole philosophy gets tested in the real world.
One of the most important watches of all time is about to go to auction. Last time it sold, it went for $11 million.
Pardon? What? 8 million. Okay, you don't let me finish. From a savvy Chinese collector sneaking on the aisle, I have 8 million to start with. I was going to say something so interesting, but you're going to miss it. Pardon me? Yes, of course, Stephanie's also bidding. 8.5 million. Let's be serious. 9 million for the gentleman seated on the aisle. Thank you, sir. I'll shut up. 9 million for the collector seated in the room, my Chinese friend. Standing far left, 9,500,000. 10 million, thank you, sir. Paddle 12 seated in the room.
10 million 5.
Thank you very much. Nathalie Montbaron, 10 million 5. 10 million, sir. 11 million for Thomas Perazzi, the fifth bidder now. No more. 11.5 for Nathalie Montbaron. 11 million 8. Merci Thomas, avec grand plaisir. 12 million for Nathalie Montbaron. Everybody came to film something, but not really much happened with the phones. 12 million. Going once. Going twice. Officially the highest price ever achieved for any vintage Patek Philippe wristwatch at auction. Thank you very much. I'm selling to Nathalie Montbaron at 12 millions francs suisses.
With real money in front of real bidders. In 2019, a Patek Philippe watch called the Grand Master Chime sold at auction for just over $31 million, becoming the most expensive watch ever sold at that time. Not the most expensive car, not a house, a single watch, small enough to fit on a wrist, worth more than most people will earn across their entire lives. Why would anyone pay that much for something that, mechanically, tells the same basic function as a $10 watch, the time? Because they're not paying for the function. They're paying for everything sitting underneath it. The family history, the self-imposed standard stricter than the industry's own rules. The years of craftsmanship poured into something engineered to survive its owner. They're paying for an object built with the specific, deliberate intention of never becoming obsolete. the part no one can buy. Here's the uncomfortable truth for every brand trying to build this kind of prestige overnight. You cannot buy this reputation. You cannot manufacture it with a bigger marketing budget or a celebrity endorsement. Patek Philippe'S power comes from something advertising simply cannot create, which is time itself. Decades of consistent decisions, repeated so long that they eventually stopped looking like choices and started looking like identity. Every generation of the Stern family could have taken shortcuts. They could have expanded faster, licensed the name onto perfume and sunglasses, mass-produced a cheaper line to chase a bigger market. Almost every other luxury brand in the world eventually did exactly that. Patek Philippe didn't. And the discipline of saying no, generation after generation, is the actual product being sold at that $31 million price tag. So the next time you see a Patek Philippe on someone's wrist, understand what you're actually looking at. It's not a display of wealth. It's a display of patience. A century's worth of a company refusing to rush, refusing to sell out, refusing to let anything leave the workshop unless it was built to outlive everyone involved in making it. That's the real secret behind the prestige, not the gold, not the complications, not the auction records. It's the discipline to build something slower than everyone else in a world that keeps demanding faster. And in the end, that discipline is the rarest material in the entire watch industry.
When the pusher is pressed, it activates a control that engages an intermediate lever, which releases two racks that drop onto the two superimposed hour cams. The upper rack interfaces with the upper cam. When the rack is moved at an angle, it moves the fox's paw to indicate the hours between 0000 and 6:59. Similarly, the lower rack interfaces with the lower cam, where the rack moves at an angle to move the fox's snout. At 6:59, the two cams reach a specific alignment, where both elements appear to be in the same place. In this instance, the snout and paw are almost superimposed. However, because only the paw has moved, it is the active indicator to be read. At precisely 7, the paw remains in its resting state, allowing the fox's snout to take over the hour indication until 11:59. To indicate the minutes, the same control lever engages with the minutes rack. Once released, the rack is held in place by a pull that prevents it from falling. Following the hours indication, the minutes rack is released, causing the cheese to fall and indicate the minutes. Because the minute scale covers an arc of approximately 100 degrees, over 3 times more compressed than a conventional circular display, extraordinary precision is required. To ensure this accuracy, the movement incorporates an anti-backlash wheel that eliminates any mechanical play in the gear train. As long as the wearer holds the pusher in the depressed position, the time remains displayed. The appliques remain in their resting state at all times, with only 2 exceptions. When the pusher at 2 o'clock is pressed to display the current time, during time setting, enabled by the extension of the pull-out piece.